Welcome. This is Adnan Khan, and you're tuning into a podcast interview I conducted with Bangladesh Consulate Consul General Tareque Muhammad. I'm a multimedia journalist currently based in Los Angeles, California. If you enjoy this interview, please share and let me know who else you would like me to interview. Thank you for listening. The Rohingya refugee crisis is ongoing. Over the last 4 years, a significant portion of my career has been working to bring attention to the Rohingya refugee crisis. Why would a nation displace over 1 million of its people? Since August 25, 2017, more than 700,000 Rohingya refugees have fled from Myanmar to Bangladesh. The Rohingya are a mostly Muslim minority ethnic group from the Rakhine state. The United Nations calls the violence committed by the Myanmar military against the Rohingya people genocide. Myanmar's ongoing persecution and human rights abuses targeting the Rohingya spans decades. Today, nearly 1 million stateless Rohingya refugees live in Kutupalong, the largest and most densely populated refugee camp in the world, and almost a half of all the refugees are children. Bangladesh is facing the reality of the Rohingya crisis and started making long-term plans. It has started moving 100,000 Rohingya refugees to Bhasan Char, an island off Bangladesh's coast. The international community has widely criticized the decision because of the island's vulnerability to storms and flooding. Recently in March, a massive fire swept through 34 camps within Cox's Bazar, killing 15 people, injuring 500, and 400 are still missing. The fire displaced more than 45,000 Rohingya refugees, just furthering the argument how vulnerable the Rohingya are and why we need to find a solution. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you, Adnan. Thank you for coming.
Before we get started, you definitely have quite the background. Like I have mentioned, you're currently serving as Consul General for the People's Republic of Bangladesh in Los Angeles, California. But before coming to Los Angeles, you were posted in the Bangladesh Embassy in Yangon, Myanmar. Would you like to tell me a little bit more about that?
Yeah, thank you. Let me welcome the audience. I would like to pay my respect to the father of the nation, Bangabandhu Sheikh Mujibur Rahman, and the able leadership of the Honorable Prime Minister, under whose guidance we are advancing our domestic and foreign policy agendas. I am here in the Consul General in Los Angeles since November 2019. Before doing this job, I was the Director General in the Foreign Ministry, and as you mentioned, I was also the Deputy Chief of Mission in Bangladesh Embassy in Myanmar from 2014 to 2017, mid 2017. And immediately after going back to Bangladesh in 2017, August, this refugee crisis erupted. And then I was put as Director General in the Foreign Ministry of Southeast Asia, which takes care of Myanmar and by default also the Rohingya issue. So I have seen this Rohingya crisis from both sides of the border. So I thought this is an opportunity to present the crisis from Bangladesh perspective.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I think it goes without saying that there's a deep history in that region, going back way before even what's been going on in the last century. Could you care to give us a little bit insight of who the Rohingya people are and what has actually kind of been going on for a while?
Thank you, Dan. Before going into this, the issue of who the Rohingyas are and what is the crisis, let me at the onset clarify a little bit. We are considering Rohingyas as forcefully displaced Myanmar national. Why we are saying forcefully? It is evident to the whole world the way they were. They had to leave their native land. This is one. And secondly, this crisis has a number of dimensions, political, economic, and regional and global as well. So we just cannot classify the crisis into like tagging it in one dimension. Like some of our international friends might like to call it an economic issue, and if you give enough economic stimulus in the area, maybe the problem will be resolved. It is not, unfortunately. It is a mix of all this. So this is one. And as for the Rohingya, we need to look at the region, which is a bridge really between South Asia and Southeast Asia. The Rakhine state of Myanmar, formerly called Arakan state, and the Rohingyas are native to that land. And like many other ethnicities, these Rohingya ethnicity also evolved over many centuries of interaction, migration, settlement, resettlement, conflicts as well, etc. So if I want to summarize a little bit, this land, Rohingyas are mostly, like almost entirely composed of people of Islamic faith. There are some very minuscule population which do not adhere to Islamic faith, but almost entirely Islamic faith. So how this people of Islamic faith, this ethnicity evolved in that area. So this leads us to the history of the population and also the area. In around 350 to 950 AD, during this period, there are some records of two dynasties in Arakan area called Dhanyabadi and Boisali. These are the two kingdom that had reigned that part, and they had strong cultural and religious link with Sanskritized people. Mm-hmm. So if you still go on, as I have visited Arakan during my posting there, you will see those symbols. And you will also see that in the south of the island, where it is believed, even in 7th, 8th century, the Arab traders used to come for trading. Now, how the Arabs end up there? Because by 7th, 8th century, Arabs had discovered to take advantage of the monsoon and return monsoon wind. Mm-hmm. So they used that to travel and trade from coast to coast. So they were then brought into this land. And so we see the first semi-permanent or maybe permanent, the records is not very clear, settlements, small number of settlements of Islamic people of Islamic faith there. And then after that, we have to remember that the Arakan is separated by 4 rivers from Bangladesh side and one big, very high altitude Arakan range from the rest of Burma or Myanmar proper. So in between these rivers and this high mountain, this land, Arakan, was more or less independent until about 1784, when King Bodapaya of Burma invaded Arakan and took away their sovereignty. And before that, about 300 years before that, more than 300 years actually, around 1401, some people might say 1404, whatever it is. In that time, there was a king in Arakan called Ming So Min. He was deposed by an attack from the other side. So he took refuge in Gore in Bengal. Mm-hmm. And he took refuge in Gore, and where the king was Jalaluddin Muhammad Shah. Mm-hmm. And then he actually served with him. And then he tried to gain favor from the king to reclaim his Arakan kingdom. And Jalaluddin indeed sent soldiers to help him under 2 generals, Wali Khan and Sandhi Khan. Wali Khan didn't do much justice to the order he has received.
Yeah.
So, but Sandhi Khan did. So we have this second batch of people, Islamic faith.
Right.
But we also have to remember that I'm trying to explain the mixed ethnicity of Rohingya people. We also have to remember that these soldiers who came, they were of various ethnicities,
Right,
from
right.
Central Asian, different ethnicities, nationalities, and
Right.
also some people of Islamic faith in that part. So these mixed people also came and settled and helped Ming So Min to
Mhm.
regain his crown. And
Okay.
Ming So Min established his capital in what we call Mrohan or Morocco. Nowadays it's called Morocco in Arakan. So this is the second batch of Islamic people came. One traders, and second is this one.
Right.
And third, when Shah Shuja, when he lost the battle for the crown in Delhi, in the Mughal king, so he fled to Arakan. He actually died in Arakan.
Mhm.
So he also brought in some soldiers of mixed origin. So
Right.
you have number 3, and then the number 4 and most important one, and the more recent one, is the British annexation of this part of Arakan
Mhm.
in 1824. British actually took control of whole of what is Myanmar today in 3 phases: 1824, 1854, 1855, and 1885.
Mhm.
So the first annexation of the part of Burma, the lower Burma, happened, and then British colonial power saw this as a land to produce surplus rice.
Mhm.
They must have thinking of, or probably did, export of rice from this part of the world to the west. And Suez Canal was inaugurated sometimes in a few decades later, I think 1860 or something.
Mhm.
So that was the thing. So for that cultivation, they need people. So they brought in people from Bengal, which is now Bangladesh.
Right.
But after 1930 or around 1910, the land was saturated, but the migration didn't stop from other parts, what is called India now today,
Mhm.
from Andhra, from Mumbai, and other places. So those people, later migrants, settled in the places in Rangoon, or what is called Yangon, and Bago, and other places.
Okay.
So this is the brief background of mixed ethnicity of people. So we have Bengali, we have Central Asian, Turks, Uzbek, and then we have other.
So a real melting pot.
Yes,
basically.
absolutely.
Yeah. Like.
And you will find them truly manifested if you visit the area.
Mhm.
That you'll find, particularly after 1431, when Ming So Min got back his crown, you'll find coin
Yeah.
inscriptions in Arabic.
Wow.
So that actually speaks of the linkages that he had
Right.
with the Muslim kings.
Right.
Also, if you look at the famous works of Alaul,
Mhm.
Daulat Kaji, and other poets who actually narrated and written pieces like Padmavati and others in Proto-Bengali,
Mhm.
which is very akin to Bengali.
Mhm.
And these are there. If someone visits museum in Mrau, they'll find those symbols there. And the temple, actually, there is a temple, I forgot the name at the moment, Chittong temple probably.
Mhm.
There is an inscription of the kings, and you'll see those inscriptions Proto-Bengali. So my question is, if there was no Bengali or Proto-Bengali speaking people, why the kings would ask the poets to do it?
Right. Right.
So that's a brief background of the ethnicity of the people. And Rohingya, etymologically speaking, it comes from the ancient Arakan word or Roshang, which also called Rohang, and then Rohingya, as we say, people of Dhaka, Dhakaiya, people
Yeah.
of Chittagong, Chittagangya. So that's why ya suffix had been added, and Rohang people of Rohang becomes Rohingya.
Right. So when I guess Myanmar finally is broken out of the colony and becomes its own sovereign state, Um, Obviously, the Rohingya are not the only groups of people that they're trying to bring together under this new leadership, but things start to shift for the Rohingya specifically. And can you shed some light on that, maybe?
Yeah, what happened is, if we look at the population by faith in the state of Rakhine, we can see roughly 60-40. I'm talking about the before the exodus happened.
Okay.
So 60-40, like 60 is Buddhist Rakhines and 40 Islamic. Islamic people mainly concentrated on the north of Rakhine state, and south is dominated by the Buddhists. That doesn't mean to say that in the north there is no Buddhists. Of course, there is a mix, but generally speaking. Now, why it happened like this? It happened like this because of the Japanese invasion in 1942-44 and the Second World War, when the Rohingya people, or almost entirely the people of Islamic faith, supported the British.
Right.
And the other faith, the Buddhist people, supported the Japanese army. Now, even before that, because of the migration, British-sponsored migration to cultivate the lands, there was some kind of tension existed, and you will see by 1930 there was a movement called Burma for Burmese only. Obviously, there were some perceived or genuine grievances of the people vis-a-vis the people brought in by the British forces. And by 1935, the Act of Burma was done to put Burma not from the I mean, Act of India and Act of Burma made, like, two separate entities. And Burma was before that was looked after from Calcutta.
Okay.
Kolkata. So by 1935, it was done, it's separated. So that was a kind of step taken to address those grievances. But still, as you can tell, there were grievances. And but what from the Myanmar perspective, what they say, even the senior general had posted in his Facebook message that the unfinished business of 1940, I would presume he means that the removal of the people who came from outside in 1942. That's what he probably meant. But whatever it is, we understand that there was a tension and there were conflicts also. And that is the precursor of the latest move that we see from the government of Myanmar or civil vigilante or people of Buddhist faith in general. So I'll elaborate on this a little bit later as it would come in the discussion. Maybe we can shift to the next related topic.
Yeah. So obviously, the government, or the Myanmar government, starts to create policy that targets them specifically, right? Like with citizenship and forso. But basically, there's been different movements throughout the 80s, the early 90s. Like what occurred in August 2017 was not the first influx.
Absolutely not.
What was the motivation behind the other acts of, I guess, violence, or some form of, I guess, I would say almost stripping a group of people of citizenship and rights, basically, right?
Yeah. If we look at the Burmese post-colonial period Burmese, which came into independent Burma in 1948, and from 1948 to 1958, there was a government, more or less a government where we haven't seen that much of. By the way, I need to mention that during the British and Japanese conflict, not only Rohingyas, other minorities in general supported the British, not the Japanese. And the result of which probably we can see till today in Myanmar is that the minorities like Kachin, Shan, Chin, Karen, Kaya, all these minorities have their self-determination um, mm, uh, I mean, ambitions.
Yeah. So
In all around, basically, the word Burma comes from the majority ethnic group called Bamar. They constitute around 69 to 70% of the whole population. I don't want to go into the detail of population numbers because we have questions about the number of population in Burma that has been stated via the latest census, I guess in 2015. We see a lot of people not represented in the census. So
Right.
without being without getting caught in the number debate, what we can see that the majority bummer um, is kind of having a difference in opinion
Right.
as far as social, economic, and political issues are concerned vis-a-vis the other minorities, uh, like I've mentioned, Shan, Kachin, Chin, Kayan, Kea, and also Rohingyas, including. So this is the in 1948 when Burma came into being. There was not much of discrimination against the minorities, including the Rohingyas.
Right.
In that kind of a relatively peaceful period, where we see that there were even Muslim ministers in Aung San's cabinet, the father of Madam Aung San Suu Kyi. And they were killed in the assassination. When he was assassinated, his cabinet colleagues, Muslims, were also killed. So we see that kind of a a kind of a diversity or a kind of an equity in political power holding was there.
Right.
But after in 1962, when Ne took power, then the situation started to get difficult for minorities, including the Rohingyas. What happened is we see step by step, little by little, things were changing. And the Muslims or Rohingyas were being marginalized, like basic denial of fundamental rights, denial of other rights, and then denial of privileges, which a citizen or a resident or a national in a particular country.
When did this come up? The idea of illegal Bangladeshi immigrant, like
that was I would say from Newin, but it came up strongly after 77, 78 Exodus. As we were mentioning, that was not the first one. 2007 was the first one. The three big ones are 77, 78, and 91, 92, or 92, 93. And the last one is 2016, 17. And so we are actually ended up hosting more than 1 million people of Myanmar, or I mean Rohingya people. And let me mention another thing before I forget, is about the when did it happen. You will see that the law, the citizenship law of 1982, I would put the year there when you see real sign of aggression against the Rohingya people. Because if you look at the provisions of the law, you would see that some impractical provisions are there to prove your citizenship. If I remember correctly, for instance, if in 1982, if you ask a person, a Rohingya, that he needs to prove that his grandfather was there before British annexed Lower Burma and Arakan in 1824, how would you produce
Yeah,
document
there were
for
no
that?
records back
And
then.
if you ask that person that before 1948, prove that your parents were there
Yeah,
in Arakan or in Myanmar,
Right.
how do you prove that?
right.
I mean, in those days there were no computers. There's not
Yeah.
much of a good record keeping. In many countries, even today, we don't have much good citizen register.
Right.
So how do you prove it? So
Right.
that was the first legal, genuine difficulty that the Rohingya faced. And then there came the this all this card controversy, like white card, this
Right.
card, that card. So these are actually step by step taking away
So
the rights of the people. Yeah.
yeah, let's kind of look at that. Like, if we start in 82 with this stripping of citizenship, is this a long plan? Is this known? Because we can look back, let's say 30, almost 40 years ago now, and see when you strip citizenship, then you stop their ability to take part in civic duties like voting. They lose benefits and resources through the government. They won't be able to hold businesses, pursue education. There's a lot of things that stops right then and there. Is that done with the foresight that we will basically injure these group of people so much that they can't conduct themselves in society and have no leverage? Is this like a big plan that they from the get-go, or is this something step by step they just see like, oh, this will hurt this group of people?
I would say it is hard to say, but from the benefit of the hindsight, it looks like it.
Yeah.
Because if you see 1977-78 exodus of I guess 200,000 people, they were entirely repatriated.
Right.
And they were repatriated as Myanmar nationals. Yeah. So that was a kind of a setback for the military government.
Right.
So immediately after that, like 3-4 years after that, you see the law being implemented, promulgated, this 1982 law.
Right.
So from the benefit of the hindsight, one might think that these are planned, but it's hard to say. The reality is there are only about 400,000 Rohingya Muslims left in Myanmar, and the rest have already...
So more outside of Myanmar than in Myanmar.
And we have the opposite picture. We have more Myanmar people in Cox's Bazar than the natives.
Yeah. I mean, what basically went down during 2016, 2017 was a culmination of a long campaign to flush the Muslim Rohingya out of the Rakhine state. Besides just wanting this ethnic group out of Myanmar, are there more motivations for the government to want the Rakhine state, like that land, to be opened for their, like, to get Muslim Rohingya out? Is there more incentive to have that land for the government than to have people there? So is there, I mean, if you have this mass exodus of millions of people, what is done with the land after that? Are they resettling it with other population, or what are they doing?
Yeah, there are a number of things that's being done. It's been reported in the media, like economic zone, mining, and resettlement of people of a particular faith and things like that. But remember, when we discuss Rohingya crisis, a couple of things we need to remember is that number one is it's not the first time it happened. 2016, 87,000 people crossover, and then 2017, we ended up like in a million plus. But even before that, in 2012, there was a conflict,
Right.
where I exactly don't remember the number, but there are IDP camps, internally displaced people camps, which are still there.
Right.
And if you remember the Kofi Annan Commission report in 17 August, which specifically recommended dismantling of the IDP camps, which is already there,
Correct.
which never had been done
Yeah.
till today. So, yeah, one can say that there were some other kind of motivation
That's
behind
what I'm
clearing
curious.
up the area.
Even before the last influx, with the attacks that were covered, the quality of life for Rohingya was already extremely bad. They didn't have the right to vote. They didn't have the right to basically run business, to group and do religious practices, so on and so forth. So can you illustrate again what the quality of life for the Rohingya was before the last influx?
As I've said, that life quality in general in Rakhine State is poor. Some bit of it you can blame it on in the remoteness of the area, but the Rakhine Buddhists feel that there is deliberate actions that from government in Myanmar that have put them in those in that kind of a situation. And among these other in the people of Rakhine State, the condition of the Rohingyas is even poorer. There was there were already when I visited there were already IDP camps. There were people in the IDP camps because of the 2012 violence. And the white card that used to be in the possession of the Rohingyas used to work until 2015. Until the 2015 election, an annulment of the card, 2015, a white card was of no use. White card, by the way, didn't automatically grant your citizenship, but it could serve the purposes of, with permission, of course, with permission, from one place to the other, visiting doctors, having basic education, white card. But after putting them in the IDP camp and after annulment of the white card, all those rights were revoked.
Okay.
So you can imagine what would happen if you need to have permission to visit a doctor immediately or urgently, and you have to wait. So you can imagine the condition of the patient.
Right.
And there were some people have reported in the internet ghettoization, even in the city of Sittwe. And so those things happened it's available in the public domain. So you can imagine there were, in general, economic, political, social, and cultural hardship. The mosque in Sittwe, the capital of Rakhine State, now last time I saw were hosting not worshippers but security men.
Right. So, what is Myanmar's, I guess, explanation or justification for the treatment up to that point before 2016?
Before 2016, the widespread quote and unquote philosophy, if I can call it, was that they are illegal immigrants from Bangladesh.
Right.
Now, I would like to quote one independent source to you here. Remember, I told you about the some conflicts even in 30s and 40s.
Right.
There was a conflict, and James Baxter Committee was constituted in 1940 by the Brits. Remember, this is not a Myanmar source, Bangladesh source, Indian source, Pakistani source, or UN source. It's 1940 Baxter report. It says that 1931, around 80% of the people living in Arakan were born in Arakan. The figures are, you can find it in the internet, but still I'm mentioning the figure. born in India in 1931. The migrants I'm talking about, 50,000 and 565 and 167,236. That is about 77% have already born in 1931.
Right.
See, the argument that illegal immigration took place in 1978, 77, 82, 1901, whatever
Mm-hmm.
year you mention after that, after so many years after that, doesn't hold any water whatsoever. And the the committee was constituted of three persons. One is James Baxter, who was the finance secretary, I believe, and Mr. U Tin Tut, not a Muslim. ICS represented Burma, and Mr. Rotilal Desai, an Indian, represented the Indians. So these are the three people, none Muslim. So this actually tell you that the people have already 80% of them been indigenized
Right.
in Arakan. So there is no argument, and the point in argument in saying that in 1982 or any year after that these are illegal immigrants. So that was the prominent hypothesis before that, and I guess the radicalization of Burma is not reported enough in global media. Yes, we have a Times Magazine the thing,
Right.
about the particular monk, but there is a widespread tendency in Burma that what we call probably you can call it Buddhist supremacy or something like that. So that actually eclipses many other minorities of other kinds of faiths, and consequently leads to marginalization.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think the way the outside world saw everything open up was that you had a radical group in ARSA and they were committing, terrorist crimes against the Myanmar government, like the police outposts and military outposts. And I think it's important, and when people tend to have like a worldly view, they can understand the levels of, I guess, target and destruction of people, communities, to understand why radicalization occurs. Like it's a buildup. And that's why I wanted to ask you in the context before 2016, because this is before I think ARSA really was able to make a dent. And those are the, like attacking police outposts and so on and so forth. Those are the things that started to make news. And I think conflated the issue of what was really happening to Rohingya for the wide, global perspective. So it was so important that we paint a picture of these people actually belong in this land, that they've been here for centuries, and statistics that show a large majority of them have been here for a long time before even the statehood of Burma, and to really just figure out why Burma wants them out, basically wants to cleanse them out, correct?
Yeah, like I said, it's like a long movie, and if you jump into conclusion watching a scene which is like 1.5 hour later,
Yeah,
and then try to justify an action by a particular actor,
right,
it would be difficult
right,
because you haven't seen the whole movie.
right.
Like this, I am not at all justifying any terrorist act anywhere. That's not my government position. That
Mhm.
is not my personal position. But the question is, when something like this happens, two things are important. The
Right.
build up, as you say.
Yeah.
What are the background?
Hmm.
What led these people to do this?
Right.
This is one that needs to be objectively analyzed. And second, are we missing the bigger picture?
Hmm.
Are we missing the bigger picture? Because yes, a terrorist act has been committed. There are ways and means to deal with it. You have security forces. You can have a proper investigation and then pursue those people.
Right.
You can also ask for help if you think that other countries' help would be necessary. Yes, countries around Burma are willing to help, but the disproportionate force with which these the whole group of people of a particular faith has been attacked is unprecedented.
Right.
So that's where the problem lies. We cannot afford to miss the bigger picture.
Right. I mean, obviously, the Myanmar government knew this time would come at some point, that there would be a revolt against this type of treatment. Um, how does a country like Myanmar get away with not allowing access to outside institutions to investigate or to report? How are they able for so long to be able to kind of keep a shadow or like a canopy over these type of things that are occurring?
Um, I would not speculate whether the Myanmar government would have previous information about an act of a criminal act would be coming against the police forces or outposts. But about what happened is when Myanmar kind of opened up after the election, but again, the international community and everyone should take careful note of the fact that till today, the parliament have 25% representative from the military forces.
Okay, so very high.
So, and if you need to bring in any kind of constitutional change, then you need to have like almost more than overwhelming majority in the parliament.
Yeah.
So it is very hard to make a policy dent in the real politic of Myanmar. This is one. And second thing is, to answer to your question is how these things going on, while we have international engagement, etc. The question is, I guess, the situation of Myanmar kind of attracted commercial interests of entities all around the globe. And that kind of overshadow what I'm calling the bigger picture.
Right.
Like, if you look at the investment in Myanmar, many of it is from countries who uphold in the international arena the value of human rights and stuff like that.
Yeah.
But I guess the entities, those are doing business in Myanmar, actually outweigh the other thing, that the rights aspect and the values aspect of it.
Right.
But probably that is the reason. But I guess we should, the international community should rise up and try to see that whatever we are doing in the name of investment, that needs to be morally correct and adhering to the international norms and values.
Unfortunately, this crisis, this refugee crisis, kind of follows the tropes of other refugee crises. A Muslim community in a country that's being targeted, and because of that nation's economic ties, they're able to get away with that type of treatment. And so what we see is the plight of another group of people be swept under the rug. And we're not talking about a small group of people. Kutupalong is known as one of the largest refugee camps in the world. And we know because, this is occurring in Bangladesh. So we constantly receive news of, things we'll go into discussion about, but replacement of them to different locations, if repatriation will occur, so on and so forth. But the world tends to forget these groups of people a lot. So why is it important to, you know, speak on what they're going through, and what do you think is more important for them, to be able to be repatriated or to stay in Bangladesh?
I guess, as our Honorable Prime Minister has said in the last United Nations GS speech, virtually, of course, in 2020, she said that she actually urged the international community to do more. The from number one perspective from Bangladesh is obviously repatriation. We have had agreement in November 2017. We have signed an arrangement for repatriation. We want Myanmar to implement the stipulations made in the arrangement. What were the stipulations? The stipulation, one of the major one was to create a conducive environment in Myanmar so that these people feel encouraged to go back. Now, it is not going to serve saying that we have done enough. How would we verify that Myanmar have done enough while Myanmar has not allowed UN investigator to visit repeatedly?
Right.
How would you make sure when the access to that area is severely restricted by international observers? How would we ensure that conducive environment has been built if we read reports where the unfortunate people who are left in Myanmar, still suffering from all those fundamental needs: access to education, access to health, freedom of movement, doing business, bringing life back to normalcy? No, that's not being happened.
Yeah.
So therefore, this saying only that Bangladesh is not doing enough. No, Bangladesh has given more than 600,000 lists as per the agreement for them to repatriate.
Yeah.
Bangladesh never took them while they were coming by national registry or something. We have not impromptu go on to identify them as foreigners.
No.
We just welcome them from the perspective of humanity. As our Prime Minister had said, that if we eat, then we will also make available enough food for them.
Right.
If it's necessary, she also went to that extent, saying that if it's necessary, we'll share our food. But I don't think food is the major problem here.
No.
This is as I said, this complicated situation, political, economic, and cultural, so most important thing is, as we have said in the agreement in 2017 arrangement, that this has to be voluntary. There has to be conducive environment in Myanmar end, and there has to be reintegration of these people.
Yeah.
If you put those apparatus still on to marginalize them, then the return or the repatriation will not be sustainable. So we mentioned about sustainable repatriation. That means Myanmar needs to do an awful lot.
We saw, I think, what was it, 6 months ago, that there have been military officers that have been tried now for, I think, rape and murder. So is that Myanmar government starting to admit might not be the correct word, but acknowledge that there has been some foul play, and maybe start to, like, I think what I'm trying to figure out is Myanmar opening to repatriation seriously, or is it more of just they're playing along with the conversation?
I guess one can seriously raise questions about sincerity of the quote and unquote steps Myanmar government had taken and being made available for the wider public opinion audience in the world. Um, the first thing need to be done is the access to UN investigation team that they haven't done. Now there are reports of a lot of things done in the ground zero in Rakhine state, where after lapse of more than 3 years, it would be difficult now to find evidence of wrongdoings. So those were done as been reported in the public media. I mean, to the in the media. I guess there has to be very important steps taken to build trust with the Rohingya people who are displaced and here in Bangladesh, and also with the government of Bangladesh. And actually, we actually have an MOU which talks about this trust and friendship and goodwill and etc., which was done in just before the conflict.
Yeah.
Or right after, I don't remember, but within this recent years. One important thing for people to understand, not only Myanmar, Bangladesh, and other people in the world, this part is extremely important for a number of reasons: economic, political, and other factors. So peace and stability in the area serves everybody. This is a win-win-win-win-win situation for everybody.
Right.
It's not only for Bangladesh and Myanmar.
Yeah.
That is in that keeping that in mind, what government of Bangladesh had done is already to the few proposals that we have done, as we were mentioning, what was the situation like even before the exodus, and I was saying that it's poor.
Right.
So we spotted that. So what we wanted to do is we wanted to have partnership with Myanmar, particularly with the Arakan state, in terms of connectivity, developing connectivity, trade, and other stuff, energy collaboration, etc.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
those proposals are there still, Myanmar, but they never saw light of the day. I don't know why, but those things could have created interdependence between the governments and the peoples.
Right.
Probably done before this exodus, this operation probably could have been averted. But again, as I have emphasized in the beginning, this is not only playing at the economic front, as a political side as well.
Right.
And from the political side, you have to acknowledge the rights and grant them citizenship. So those are there. But this could have helped, at least created an interdependence between the peoples of the region. Now that has not been done. So then one can ask the question, what is the seriousness? So first, we need to build trust.
Right.
The people in Bangladesh, the Rohingya people, need to realize, and they would realize only when there is conducive environment in Rakhine state, that it is safe to go back in there. They're like, you have to instill a sense of security in them.
Yeah.
And as our Prime Minister had already said, that's why we're saying, Prime Minister said, all the ministers said, foreign ministers said, we have been saying at our level that the problem was created by Myanmar and the solution has to be found in Myanmar.
Right.
So that's the phrase that we have been telling again and again and again.
Yeah. I mean, the only way feasible, I think, for repatriation is if Myanmar will let, an organization like the UN or some, access, right, to build the infrastructure back. Because otherwise, logistically speaking, you very well could force hundreds of thousands of people back into a circumstance that will not, benefit them And I think Myanmar, in the sense of, is kind of trying to wipe their hands clean. So Bangladesh cannot really pressure Myanmar to take them back, because Bangladesh cannot pressure Myanmar to make these changes. Yet we have, the Rohingya, and I think this is, kind of the question we do have to start discussing, is their life is in limbo right now. I mean, this last influx from 2017, we still had, I remember reporting when the influx started, 10,000 people a day were coming over the border. And that's only because that was what Bangladesh was capable of bringing over. If we had allowed more people to come over in a day, that rate would have been higher. Like, people were coming with stories of so much disaster, and come and have settled and have been here now with no plans, not knowing what to do. They're still waiting for what direction to go. So I'm sure they've lost trust, and then Bangladesh has had to figure out what to do now. Where do we put these people? So maybe you can kind of explain where do the Rohingya sit right now in Bangladesh?
Yeah, before responding to that, let me mention some important things. Like you were saying that atrocities with genocidal intent.
Yeah.
It's been now declared by the criminal court, international criminal court.
Right.
Now, accountability is part of building trust,
right,
and building security,
right,
and in terms, it plays a huge part in building conducive environment.
Mm-hmm.
So justice has to be served, and also justice needs to be perceived in the minds of the victims. Only then you can have some claim that we have made some conducive environment. That has not been done yet.
Right.
So I don't know where ICC or ICJ proceedings would take us. They have their own course of procedures and actions, and so that we are yet to see. But it is good that some progress have been made in to this effect. And coming back to the question of where would they go now, they're in limbo, etc. You have seen, as I have, during our numerous visits to Rohingya camp, that they are basically living in a very squalid condition.
Mm-hmm.
It's not at all ideal. We're not very proud of that. As from government of Bangladesh perspective, we have given acres of land. Their frustration has no limit. Politically deprived, economically marginalized, criminalized, made victim, traumatic experiences. If you had talked to the ladies who have been violated,
Right.
and in fact, the keeping this in mind, we have a clause in the 2017 arrangement which says that children born out of unwarranted circumstances.
Right.
If you ask me, I mean, recognition, that document is signed by government of Bangladesh and government of Myanmar together.
Yeah.
So that actually says that something bad had happened.
Something occurred.
Obviously, because otherwise this phrase was
right.
Wouldn't have been there. Their condition is painful and traumatic, no doubt about it. Now, how would we service these people? By taking government help, by subscription from UN agencies.
Mm-hmm.
That's not going to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you need to have a decisive change of fate of these people. That actually tells us repatriation. That's why we are emphasizing so on repatriation, so much on repatriation, because there's no other way. They don't belong here. People in Western world might be thinking that, okay, there has some ethnic connection between the people of Bengal to the Rohingyas. So the language must be the same. No, no, no.
No.
The language isn't same. I speak the dialect of Chittagong people, although I'm not from Chittagong, but I studied there, so I understand. But I don't understand Rohingya when they talk.
Right, right.
It's different.
Yeah.
It's different. So so therefore, they don't belong to this land, to the land of Bangladesh. They belong there. Their destiny, their fate, their development is there. So therefore, they need to be repatriated. So for that, diplomatically, Bangladesh government is doing as much as they can. And another thing Bangladesh has done successfully is not to get into a military conflict with Myanmar.
Yeah.
Because
Okay.
in 2017, you must have heard,
Yeah.
there were reports of airspace violations several times, but our forces never responded back.
Yeah.
So they just kind of allowed the thing to die down, militarily speaking.
Right.
And that actually worked. And thanks to the leadership of our honorable prime minister, that we have successfully avoided any confrontation, which we don't like.
Right.
We know what is war like.
Yeah, yeah.
So we don't want to repeat that experience. What actually happened is, in case of this, there were some, as is ought to happen with people who are confined in a so limited space, frustration often brings about some lawlessness. That has happened.
Yeah.
And therefore, we needed to do something. And we are trying to do that.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I think because I was there after the influx throughout the, opening months of the camp, the new people, and I was hearing stories about this is even better than what we were facing back home, like the violence and everything. Like they felt at peace. But as someone that, over time will see issues start to build up within the camps, also the fact that you have people that, cannot really do much to earn a living for themselves. They're stuck in this system. So besides repatriation, another thing that's come up in the news is Bhasan Char.
I knew you're coming to that. Yeah.
I mean, like you said, like there aren't a lot of solutions really on the table right now, and this seemed to be one that the Bangladesh government thought was good. Can you probably shed a little bit more light into this?
Yeah, this comes from, is connected to the comment that I made to your last question. What would you do with these people? Now, the discourse of relating to, like, Rohingyas are not interested to go to the Bhasan Char, they would not be safe there, and are they going voluntarily? This kind of discourse have a common problem. The common problem is, again, are we trying to address the root cause of the problem or dealing with the branches?
Yeah.
I would say this kind of discourse is dealing with branches. Now, the root cause is Myanmar needs to take decisive action to create conducive ground so that these people can be repatriated. All other things are branches. Now, this was a domestic compulsion on part of the government of Bangladesh because of the situation they were in. We are fully sympathized with the situation they're in.
Of course, yeah.
So, and if you had a look at the facilities in Bhasan Char, it is like 3-4 times better than they are in here.
Yeah.
And about 3,000 have been relocated in Bhasan Char, and they went voluntarily, and which I heard, and now we are here. We are hearing that many Rohingyas are willing to actually go there.
Right.
Initially, we have like 100,000 accommodation in Bhasan Char, but that can be upgraded subsequently. So government is doing that. But questioning the intent of the government and trying to deal with the offshoot problems is going to take us from it will take the focus off Myanmar. As I'm saying, the problem is with Myanmar. So we need to focus more, the international community to do more with Myanmar. There are ways and means to do it, to make condition for Myanmar to comply with the provisions of the arrangement, with the agreement, and also to make things so that Myanmar realizes that doing a bad thing has a cost. I'm not
Right.
talking about sanctions and per se, but I'm talking about there are other kinds of costs as well.
Yeah.
We don't want Myanmar to be marginalized in the global Committee of Nations. We want Myanmar to be integrated in the global Committee of Nations. But to do that, you need to do the right things.
Right.
If you do the wrong things, then you have to compensate.
Yeah.
So that message can be given by the international community.
And I think it's really important. I think you bring up a good point. Bangladesh ends up with, a group of people on their doorstep and no choice but to take care of these group of people and trying to find any solution possible within their grasp, and to be criticized for trying to come up with solutions when the main, architect of the whole problem is Myanmar, and they're not doing anything to really fix the situation. It does not run correct with attacking Bangladesh for any type of
Right.
solution.
So
Yeah.
just to add a couple of points, and there are some activities that these people can undertake, like poultry, cattle, fishing, farming, something in Bhasan Char. In comparison, here we had a problem
Yeah.
because if we allow them to work in the local community, that is gonna bring in some kind of, that has already brought in some kind of imbalance, particularly in wage structure
Yeah.
and job opportunity.
Right.
Bangladesh is not endowed with a big land like many other countries.
Not only that, I think a lot of people don't necessarily know much about Cox's Bazar. Obviously land, but also economy and education. I mean, this is a region of within Bangladesh that also has been facing a lot of the economic instability. So you bring in a whole population to compete, it does throw everything into, off balance. So yeah, I think it's definitely this place where I think from an outsider's perspective, it looks like Bangladesh is just taking the brunt of the responsibility, with help, from organizations and other nations, but really taking the full brunt of it. And 1 million people is not a small number. And in some amazing way, Bangladesh has been able to economically grow since the last recession in 2008, with everything that's been going on and within the world, and even adding with this Rohingya crisis, still is able to, make an impact on a global scale. And I mean, do you see anything coming in the future that will help with this situation, or is it really just on, conversations like this going on?
I think a trilateral mechanism involving Bangladesh, Myanmar, and China has just started to work, and I think they have a meeting recently, a couple of days ago. So we are exploring options,
Yeah.
bilateral, trilateral, regional, global, whatever option is available. Our priority is safe, sustainable, voluntary repatriation of these people from our land to theirs, and also we urge the international community to look at the crisis from all its possible elements that impact the situation, and try to have a comprehensive um, um, approach to solve this problem, not like a truncated or short-term approach, because as I've said before, this area is quite important in the Bay of Bengal, neighboring Bangladesh, India, and Myanmar is not also very far from China, and so we have to think about a long-term perspective and bringing in peace and stability in the region is for everybody's benefit. It is not a bilateral problem, because the problem is entirely of Myanmar's. We have not engaged with Myanmar militarily. Rather, we tried to engage Myanmar from economic, social, political, beneficial relationship perspective. Actually, we have made some. We have, from our modest capacity, we have made some donation as well in terms of cyclone shelters in Myanmar and ambulances to Myanmar. I mean to Rakhine state. So these are signature of goodwill. So we are not. We don't um, think of Myanmar of anything bad. What we want to say is that this is a problem, and Myanmar has to find the solution to it. And international community needs to take the proper actions to nudge, influence, encourage Myanmar to take the right actions.
Is there anything else you would like to add to the topic? Well, I really appreciate you sitting down with me today and discussing not only what is currently happening for the Rohingya in Bangladesh, but the history, giving a full context, shining light, I think, for an audience that might not know as much about what Bangladesh does behind the scenes and, what lies ahead forward for the Rohingya people. So I really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I hope repatriation takes place soon, and these people might go back to their home, and these two countries can live at peace. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for listening.